Hello, and welcome to Faith on Dirt Roads. Today's episode was recorded in what we call our Forever Ministry home for my nonprofit organization, His Heart for Africa in Jinja, Uganda. It is our ministry hub, a safe place for our students to hang out and be discipled during their school holidays. You might hear life around us, like Loki, our Great Dane, African gray parrots and other birds, monkeys, and many other sounds. You might even hear words we use daily in Jinja, but don't know what they are. You can always send me a note through our website, faithondirtroads.com, to learn more about life in Jinja. On today's episode, you are going to hear about a scary medical event that happened to me that also shows how good our God is. It can be daunting to live 8,000 miles away from home, friends, and family, and so many things can happen. Unfortunately, one of my biggest fears came true in December of 2024. As I look back on these events with Tara that took place only a few months ago, I'm so thankful God put the right people in Jinja at the right time. I hope you enjoy hearing about our adventure, as we call it, but now can see God's timing was perfect. Hey guys, it's Heather here, and I'm with Tara, and we're going to talk about a crazy thing that just happened to me at the end of 2024 and beginning of 2025. So Tara, thanks for coming on and helping me describe to everyone what happened.
On our adventure that we had.
Is that what we call Big Bertha?
Big Bertha was quite the adventure.
Tara and I have both lived in Uganda for quite a bit of time. Tara for 4 years and myself 11 years. I had woken up after Christmas of 2020 in terrible pain and was just kind of freaking out and honestly didn't know what was going on, but knew I was super sick and unhealthy and was trying to get a hold of Tara and got her. She came over and really we just started going to a couple of different clinics. That was early in the morning. It was like 4 a.m. and we were heading over to a clinic.
Yeah, I was over here by 3:30, so we just had to wait on Dennis to get here to watch the dogs, and then we got in the car and left. We went to one of the only clinics in town that was actually open at that time that had an ultrasound available, because when I got here and saw you, where you were hurting was kind of indicative of a gallbladder attack. So that was kind of first course was let's go check out your gallbladder and see what's going on with that.
So that everyone understands who's listening, when you get to the hospital, what happens first?
You have to pay.
Right. So I remember handing you my credit card and being like, this is my limit. Just keep me alive. Let's see what happens. And by the time that you had paid, I was laying on the table and the ultrasound lady was standing there. And she kind of just glanced over the gallbladder and it looked okay to you. Mm-hmm. But what did you see?
Yeah, so after paying, I went back in the room and she was kind of already scanning Heather, and I saw her gallbladder too. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But she kind of accidentally moved the wand as she was typing something. And when she moved the wand, I saw that there was a mass. I made a point to tell her and she was like, no, the gallbladder's fine. And I was like, you're not on the gallbladder. And so I was like, you're over the liver. And so then she purposely moved the wand and she as well saw that there was a mass there.
So at that point, could you see that my liver was also enlarged, or was that later?
Well, because of the poor quality of the instruments, she didn't span over the entire size of the liver. You could see where the liver was, and then you could see the mass coming from the liver, but she didn't go over the extreme of the liver at that point.
So what did we do next?
I had to go pay again for us to do a CT, because obviously we saw the gallbladder was okay, and now we've seen this mass, and so we need to get a better picture of how big this mass is, where this mass is, what's going on with it. Heather, at the time, we were convinced she was allergic to IV contrast because of an allergy when she was younger. And so they were trying to give her IV contrast, and I had to be a very stern person so that they would not give you IV contrast and kill you.
Yeah, I remember laying there and being like, no, you can't give me whatever you're trying to.
Yeah.
And then, so we get that, and we were trying to get some simple blood work at this same clinic. And I remember, I started getting super nauseous because I was in so much pain. Mm-hmm. Nothing worse than calling my mom and, it was night for them, early morning for us. And so I was crying. I was super scared. There was a lot of unknowns in these early hours of what is going on with my body. And I remember I started getting nauseous and I was just in so much pain. And so you tried to get some blood work done on me just so you could see what is going on with my liver?
Yeah.
And you wanted to do just a normal CBC and just make sure, like, do I have malaria? Do I have all these things? And if I'm remembering correct, the guy just refused to do it even though we paid for it?
Yeah, they wouldn't do anything. He barely started the IV. He got the IV, he drew a little blood, he refused to draw the most. Like, okay, so at this point, we saw how big it was on the CT. It was like the size of a baseball. And we knew that we were going to need to go get an MRI to get better imaging since she could not have contrast. And then I was trying to get him to give her pain medicine and nausea medicine and draw blood, and they just didn't want to do anything.
So I remember very clearly and sternly saying, we're getting out of here. Drive me to CAMU. And CAMU is a clinic that we use for our ministry, and that's where our students and our elderly are taken care of. And we love Dr. Charles. He does a great job. He's got some great nurses who all know me, and I was like, if anybody can take care of me, you know, just so everyone's clear, Tara is medically trained from the U.S., and so I had given her full permission to help take care of me in the best way possible until we could figure out what was happening. Because here, just so everyone's clear, I was in so much pain, and all they wanted to give me was like basically a small Tylenol. And so that wasn't going to cut what was going on with my body and what was happening. And so luckily Dr. Charles was so gracious and was like, whatever Tara needs, just please help her and help Heather. And so I remember we got there and got an IV going, and you immediately got me on really good pain medicine and really good anti-nausea medicine. I remember getting stuff ready, and honestly, just at that point, I had already called our driver and I said, please go to the house. We will pay you. I don't care how long you're there. Wait for me. I need you to take me to Kampala. Dennis was already here with the dogs at that point. We had gotten our other friend, Amelia. She was coming over to hang out. Okay, so we're at CAMU. You're trying to get me, just comfortable enough to where I can make it to the 2.5 hour drive to Kampala. We're going to go get me an MRI. Going to go see what is going on. And so walk me through, I don't even remember getting in your car. I do remember coming here back to the house. Dennis was terrified, as he should have been. I was terrified. I had called Betty multiple times at this point. She was in America visiting her family for Christmas, especially. She was at her grandparents' house, and so I just kind of messed up everybody's plans and everything, and it was quite the ordeal. But
it was actually the first time I had a conversation with your mom, really, too. Because you were FaceTiming her, and then you needed to throw up, and you're like, here, talk to Mom. So I was like trying to keep your mom calm and like tell her what's going on, even though we still really didn't know anything at that point. We knew there's a mass. We don't know what the mass is. We don't have lab work at this point because the other hospital did not run anything. This hospital, the results hadn't come back yet. We just knew like you had to have a couple doses of pain medicine, a couple doses of nausea medicine before we could get in the car and drive to Kampala.
Yeah, and I'm thankful. So we made it. And then I remember just never being anxious during medical things, but I walked into that MRI room and was terrified. I've never seen that small of an MRI machine, and I later found out that it is a Chinese model of a GE, like brand new, state of the art. Nothing wrong with it. It was just made for way smaller people than...
It's not made for Americans.
Yeah. So I remember laying in it, and I was in so much pain, and my arms next to my side were literally touching both sides of it, and I have just never felt so claustrophobic. And they put, this thing on top of your stomach so they get the better imaging. And I remember it just being, obviously it's loud. If you've ever had an MRI before, they're loud. I was already like in so much pain, even though you had me on good medicine. And I remember just looking behind me, and I don't know if I told you this, but the blue wall had clouds painted on it, and instead of counting sheep during my MRI, I counted clouds because I was just so nervous and in so much pain.
Yeah.
And I remember coming out to you and I feel like I looked like I was about to fall over. But what happened after that? Because I really don't remember.
So even while we were at CAMU, on the way to Kampala, and even while we were in Kampala waiting, I was messaging doctors that I worked with in the States. I was messaging doctors that I trust here in Uganda, just trying to see like, okay, so if this is like a mass, what do we need to do? Like, we're still waiting on results. We got some of her test results back at the time. Her liver enzymes were through the roof. Her platelets were through the roof. Numbers were terrible. Her white count was elevated because her body's fighting something. So we were still very much like unknown, but what do we do? Like, obviously at this point we're kind of already starting talking about coming back to America, but we needed to kind of see how stable we were. We needed more lab work. We needed like this MRI result. So they told me that we would get the results in 3 hours. I could call in 3 hours. So we drove back to Jinja. And luckily, Heather slept most of the way there and most of the time sitting there, and then most of the way back because of the pain medicine. I did have to give you more when we got back that night. But then the results were not back. And then the next morning, the results were not back. And it was like 10 o'clock the next day before they were finally like, hey, here's her results. And so the MRI results still did not confirm everything to us, but it did confirm the size of it, and it did look like it was a clot. But still, we weren't really sure of what it could be, because they also estimated, basically they were saying it could either be this big blood clot or it could be cancer. And so we got a couple other labs. One of them was to check a cancer level, and praise God it was negative. But we still were very unsure at this point. So in talking to one of the doctors here, Dr. Charles, actually, he thought it might be an abscess on your liver.
Which those are normal, like
Yes.
common. People can get them. And so I know he had changed one of my antibiotics, and I was really struggling to handle any and all medicine and food at that point. And we really didn't know why until later, why all of that was happening. But so you get me pretty much stable, and we're trying to get me fluids. We're trying to just figure out when I can fly out. We were also dealing with travel insurance, and I've always had a policy on myself. We've always carried one on Betty as well. And the part that we learned about this, which really just stinks, was that it was really, they were trying to move me laterally. And I felt like it wasn't going to be any better if I got to Nairobi or South Africa, because at the end of the day, I was still really far from my mom and family, and if I was about to have surgery, which we were pretty certain I was going to, I didn't want to be that far. And so I remember we did not do anything with travel health insurance. They were super nice as far as like the nurses that you talked to, and they were super caring, and they tried
called
to
several times checking on you.
But the insurance portion of that was just terrible. Nope, we can only take you here or here. And I was like,
still within Africa.
I was like, yeah, that's not really what I want. And so I had booked a flight thinking, oh, it's okay. I can make it until this date, and then I'll get to see Betty when she gets back.
Because we had very ups and downs.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a consistent good day or a consistent bad day. It was very up and down, which later we found out was because anytime you ate or drank anything other than plain water, you had severe pain and just felt terrible.
Well, and just, I'll tell everyone, I had severe diarrhea. I mean, everything was flowing through me, and it was because, well, my liver can't process anything. But later we found out that, the mass had actually attached itself to my small intestines and was really just wreaking havoc everywhere in my insides. So we finally make the decision, okay, I got to get out of here.
Well, we got labs back on Sunday, and that was going to be a determinant of when exactly. We knew we were moving your flight forward. Like, we weren't going to stay until the 9th anymore. But the labs on Sunday, because you started feeling really terrible Sunday, we're going to determine if we flew Monday or Wednesday.
Yeah, and so we got those labs back, and I remember they weren't great, but they weren't significantly worse enough for us to go. So we booked our flight for Wednesday, and very thankful for my family. They paid for Tara and I to fly home. So Tara got all of the stuff ready for her organization to be gone for, at that point, we really didn't know how many days she was going to be with me, or weeks. And so she went and set up her organization, got everybody ready and set up to be without her for whatever amount of time that was going to be. We were very blessed to have Amelia stay here, be with the dogs.
Because Betty still wasn't back yet.
Yeah, and so we booked our flight, and we were going to leave here on New Year's Day. And so Betty was also flying out of America on New Year's Day. And we were both going to be landing, me in America, her back here, on the 2nd of January. And so we booked it, and we got myself to the airport somehow. I really think it's only by the grace of God that I was able to handle any of that because of how much pain. You had me pretty well controlled, but there were so many ups and downs, and then because my clotting was so high, I couldn't keep an IV, and so we had made a deal that as long as I drank enough water, I could be off an IV, and that's really just the bulk of what I remember. And I feel like I was doing okay until we were in the middle of our first flight and our flight got canceled. And I was just like, why is the enemy, going against me so bad? And later we found out, that plane wasn't going to leave Amsterdam, the one that we were supposed to be on, the second one, due to mechanical issues. And so God put us through Amsterdam into Detroit instead of Atlanta. And then we ended up getting to Nashville 2 hours earlier, which was truly a God thing. Yeah. So instead of landing after 7, we got there around 5 and went straight to Vanderbilt. And really, I remember just walking into the airport, and looking at Tara going, I really don't want to use a wheelchair if I can make it. But at the end of our journey in Nashville, at BNA, I literally looked at you and I was like, I'm close to needing a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And then at the hospital, what'd you get me?
Wheelchair. Get out of the car. But I will say, before we left, I looked at Heather and I said, our goal is to get to Europe. Like, one stop at a time. Yes, our end goal is America. Our end goal is Nashville. But if we get to Europe and you're absolutely terrible, we're stopping there because it's better than here, healthcare-wise. If we get to America, even if it's not Nashville, because we can't fly direct to Nashville, we're stopping there. Like, we're going to take it one step at a time, but you have to tell me what's going on, you have to be honest with me, and you have to drink water. There was one point where she was getting a little woozy because she had not had food in several days at that point, and so I made her take some apple juice, which, I'm sorry, it almost killed you, but it also saved your life. And so, yeah, I will say I've never felt the weight of the world on my shoulders as I did in that 24-hour journey. But when we landed in Detroit, we got off the plane, and I could tell that she was, like, done at that point.
Oh, I was emotionally checked out more so than ever, and physically my body was giving me, it was pushing as hard as it could, and I was trying to give 110, and it was like I could barely give you like 1% because my body was just over it. And I was still trying. I didn't give up, but it was just like, Tara, when we get through this, I gotta go sit down. I'm done.
I looked at you and I was like, can you make it another hour and a half flight? Like, if you cannot, we're stopping here. We're in America. Like, there's got to be a good hospital around here. Like, we can figure this out. Can you make it one more flight? And you thought about it for a moment.
Oh, I totally
you thought
did.
about it for a moment.
Yeah.
And then you're like, no, we're going. So when we landed, I actually called her mom and I was like, okay, you need to have the car. We're landed. We're going to stop at the bathroom. We're walking out. We're getting in the car. We're going straight to the hospital. We're not stopping. We're not doing anything.
In my classic stubbornness, for all of you who know me, I was like, nope, I'm going to go shower before I go to the hospital because I know that's all going to be over. I had big plans, y'all. Like, I was like, I'm going to see Nashville before I go to the hospital. And literally, I was like, Tara, I'm done. I'll go to the hospital now, which is how everyone knew, wow, I was kind of bowing out. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be stupid. We got to get me taken care of. So luckily, one of my best friends, Holly, helps my mom by picking her up from Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. Like, they got my mom's car set up in valet because Vanderbilt's massive and parking can be difficult. And Holly came because she, I needed to see her, but my friends were amazing, and I just need to make sure everyone knows like how appreciative I am of all the prayers that everyone prayed over me and Tara and even Betty during that time, because there were so many unknowns. Betty was still in America. People were even praying for Amelia, who was staying with us, because the night I got sick, that day I got sick, literally Tara and Amelia moved into the house here with me to take care of me and help take care of the dogs. And there were just so many things that were unknown, and we were just so thankful for all the prayers. People at our church, Tara's friends, some of Amelia's friends, Betty's friends and family, everyone literally just what is happening, and truly just having to go, God, we don't know what's happening, but, believing that he was going to be good and faithful. And, I'm alive today, which I'm telling you, it's truly a miracle. So we get to Nashville, we get into the hospital. You have a friend working there who gets me triaged immediately because, you could look at me and tell I was super sick. I couldn't go sit in a waiting room and be okay afterwards. And so we make it there, and I've been triaged. People have looked at me. We've done some blood work, waiting for things to come back. And they went ahead and got an ultrasound. I got a CT. And then we find out that my mass that we call Big Bertha she had actually sprung a leak, and that was part of why I was in so much pain after we got to Vanderbilt, which I hadn't really had that in that way before. And so what happened?
I mean, it was a God thing that our flights got changed for sure, because the time when she started having intense, like severe pain, even in a different part of her stomach, was when we initially would have been landing. So we got there 2 hours earlier. And so at that point, initially they were just trying to give her pain medicine and everything else. We had done an ultrasound as soon as we got there. They verified that the mass was still there. It was the same size. They had taken her for CT. The mass was still there. It was the same size. But then a couple hours later is when she started having severe pain, and they started doing more tests and more tests. I mean, like, you go to Vanderbilt, it's a teaching hospital. You're going to get any and every test, even if you don't want the test. The next day, we noticed that her blood levels were dropping, which was not the case prior. We did lab work like 5 or 6 times while we were here in Jinja, kind of watching numbers to make sure like where she was stable enough to fly. And her blood levels started dropping quite significantly. And so they did another scan at that point, which was when they found blood, like free floating blood in her pelvic region, her abdomen. And they realized that Bertha had got bigger at that point as well. So this mass actually was encapsulated just like in a thin skin, basically, and it was a blood clot. And so as her platelets were fighting to make this blood keep clotting itself, it eventually just stretched to a point where it started free bleeding into your belly.
Yeah, so we make it through all of that. I'm still in the ER because trying to find a bed on the floor is difficult. We had some challenges that we'll briefly talk about. So because I came from an African country, there's always worries that you're carrying something, which is valid. And with what I had, there is a possibility of lesions on your liver from TB. And so there were some very concerned infectious disease doctors, IDs. So these ID doctors really were concerned that I might have been carrying TB. And so we had a few hiccups with how I gave my sample, how far apart the sample could be. 2 of them might have been lost by the lab.
But they were just found last week,
and
right?
they were found because it was like 6 weeks after surgery, and I got test results that said that it was still good. I am TB clear, which we already knew. But those were kind of the holdup for me getting up to the liver floor for my surgeon to be able to work on me. So we entered the hospital the 2nd. On my birthday, the 7th, I turned 34 at Vanderbilt, which was not a highlight. And I was like, anything has to be better than this for the rest of the year. But my surgeon, we got my results. I was cleared. And that surgeon immediately said, I want you up on my floor. We're going to do surgery. And they had planned for me to do surgery the next day. So get moved up on the floor. So we then met with the team, and they were like, yeah, we're doing surgery the next day, which was the 8th. My surgery got bumped, and so instead of it being in the afternoon like we thought, I had to wait till late in the evening.
They took you back at like 7:45 that night.
Yeah, so another thing I just want everyone to understand is my mom was present during the day, but because of how many doctors come in and out of your room and how many different teams I had working on me, it made more sense for Tara to stay with me because I could not retell the story as many times as they needed me to. And every time someone would come in the room, I would just be like, this is Tara, who kept me alive, got me home, flew me across the world, and she'll answer any of your questions. And that's how I just directed everything. Because
from the moment that I picked you up that morning on the 27th when it first started, I had like a note in my phone of your medical record, like every medicine you got, what time you got it, what we did, when we did it, how we did it, what the results were. So I had literally everything from the 27th.
Well, and I was truly exhausted, had IVs in both arms. I did my part and I got myself to America is what I felt like. And after that, I just kind of laid in that bed and was just like, whatever happens, happens. And not in a negative way, and I hadn't given up, but I was just kind of like, I made it. Mm-hmm. I'm here. It's okay. And even I would say my mom was more chill the moment I landed than, and she should have been freaking out, but we really were all pretty calm. And I'm so thankful for my friends. I had, on the night of my surgery, they came up and so my mom, Misty, and Holly sat in the cafeteria hanging out until you left me at that last little bit of like pre-op.
Yeah.
and then you joined them. And you said that it was just the best thing for my mom.
Yeah.
So
I got up there, they were cackling like little hens. It was the sweetest thing ever.
So
it was good for all of them.
Good stories about me or just random stuff?
They were telling stories about you. They were telling stories about the other kids.
Yep.
Which that was the first time I had met Misty, and I had only briefly met Holly when she drove us to the hospital.
Yeah.
Other than the FaceTime calls here. So yeah, they were just all laughing, and like it was really good for all of them. And then your mom and I were like, listen, we need to go sleep for 2 hours while Heather's in surgery. We need to go take a nap because we don't know what this is going to entail. Her and I went upstairs, and so the circulating nurse was sending me messages. Hey, Heather went back. Hey, we're doing this. Hey, Heather's doing great. And so the next, one of the last ones he sent was like, hey, probably in 2 hours I'll give you another update. So if you need to rest, you rest. And I was like, sounds great. I think your mom and I both passed out. And I had my phone volume on high because I was afraid I would miss a call or something if I was just totally out of it. And so the next thing I knew, I got a message from the circulator that they were closing you up, that you had done great. It was a lot more advanced than they thought it was going to be. And then probably within 15 minutes of that, the surgeon called me and he's like, hey, are you with Heather Teague? And I was like, yes, sir. Because he didn't identify himself at first. And I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, okay, where are you? I need to come talk to you. And it kind of sounded scary the way he said it. Because I was like, we're in her room upstairs. And he's like, okay, I'll be right there. And it was kind of just short. I mean, this poor guy had been in surgery since 8 a.m. though. He was
done. Yeah, it was his third one.
Yeah. And they were all complicated.
Yeah.
And so he came upstairs and he talked to us and he's like, this mass was massive. And so initially they had talked about doing a biopsy.
Yeah.
Here and in America. And we refused for them to do it here. And so in America, they were actually talking about it. And then when this liver surgeon looked at your scan and he was like, no, I think this is total blood. If we pop this, we're going to do damage. So when he came up, he was like, it's a good thing I didn't pop it because it's as big as a cantaloupe and it was total blood. They ended up showing us a picture, which is a cool little alien blob. You came back upstairs we probably slept for another hour and a half, and then you came back upstairs after that.
Yeah, so initially they had said, oh, it'll be a couple of inches, we'll just, figure it out. And I came back with a much larger cut than I think anyone was expecting, even the surgeon, because once he got in there, obviously he was like, we can't pop it, take it whole.
They hadn't done imaging since several days prior, so Bertha had grown.
Correct.
And so he didn't know how big she was when he went in to cut her out.
And it's very common if you're having a liver surgery to also potentially have your gallbladder removed.
Yeah, because you don't really need it.
Well, and so I had already consented to it, which was great because the surgeon said, I'm glad that you were already good with that because Bertha had actually wrapped itself around it, and so it was coming out either way. And then also he very quickly was able to say, hey, we know why you weren't eating because we also had to, take it away from your intestines.
It basically had her intestines kinked. Bertha was sitting on top of your intestines so much that nothing would pass.
I kind of am like it was the meatball on top of the noodles of my intestine.
Yeah.
I mean, as gross as that might be, Bertha was that big and it weighed enough because of how blood-filled it was. So the next day was pretty rough. It was my first day out of, surgery and
post-anesthesia, post being sliced in half.
Yeah.
Her incision is half of her belly, so...
It is, but I ended up having to have a thoracic epidural, and Tara stuck by my side and let me squeeze her hand to almost breaking it off for that to happen. And honestly, after that, immediately, I was a different person.
Yeah, within 2 minutes of him injecting the stuff, you're like, let me move myself up in bed.
Yeah, which if you even breathed on me, I was dying, honestly. But I remember, so we were, at this point, okay, Tara needs to go visit her family. We felt like I was out of the woods by then. So my mom had gone home, picked up some clothes. Our snowstorm was about to happen.
There was also a big blizzard coming, and that was kind of part of the, if you're going to go, you kind of have to go now.
Yeah. And so then...
Because I think my dad hasn't been in the best health, and for me to be in Tennessee and not see him, I think would have been really sad too.
Yeah, so we wanted, obviously it wasn't just to bring Tara over for me and ship her back. It was, hey, how many days do you want to be here? You can crash at our place, you can be wherever. And so after surgery, I really felt like my mom and I could handle it at that point. I was such a different person. Got myself up, got me walking, started eating some food, and then was actually discharged on the 11th, so on Saturday. And then you were still hanging out with your family, and then had your friend bring you back to our house on Monday. And then we had a team leaving from our church to come visit Betty and be here and help her during that. And you actually flew with them on that Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so that was the last time I saw you until I just made my grand appearance just last week, which is pretty amazing. I'm about 60 days out post-surgery. 70. It's been 70 days since surgery as we're recording this right now. Which is just amazing in itself, because most people were like, you probably won't be back until summer. But I really had a drive, and like, I had something I was working towards, which was to get back home. And this is definitely my home. As much as I love every single person that prayed for me and helped take care of me or brought us food, being in Jinja is definitely my home. And it's where our ministry is, our students, and just everything. So
yeah,
it was a big deal.
It was an adventure.
It was an adventure. Big Bertha was definitely an adventure. And so I'm excited.
So, I mean, we still did not know what it was until your biopsy came back. He was pretty certain when he removed it, but he still was like, it could be something else. Because there were lesions in your liver still. There was
I have a spot on my lung.
On your lung, yeah. These like weird little red bumps kept popping up on you. And so there were still a lot of unknowns, but I think getting those biopsies back were also kind of like a breath of like, okay. It's something that like we know how to prevent anything now, and it's like it's not cancer. That was the biggest thing. Yeah,
so at this point, all my biopsies have come back, and I'm cancer-free, doing great, back in my home in Jinja. And I have to go back to America, in the fall for some follow-up MRI just to verify that the other ones aren't growing, because this can happen. But all in all, like, truly can see God's hand in everything. And just the fact that you and Amelia didn't travel for Christmas was such a blessing.
Yeah, we're like two of the only people here.
Yeah. And so thanks for sitting down and sharing, this time with me. I know it was scary for me, but also I know it had to be scary for you, because it was like so much pressure on you, but honestly, what a blessing to have you.
I'm like, okay, God, this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm here to do. I will say so I didn't really feel like I could turn off until I got your team here safely. And then when I passed over the team to Betty, I was like, okay, I need to sleep for 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
I didn't realize like how exhausted I was too, because it was like, even in the hospital, like I was having to advocate for you a lot. There was a lot of things that were like, wait a minute, what are you doing? You didn't give her pain medicine. You didn't just having someone there. Like, I'm thankful that I could be there for you and your mom. I know it made your mom feel better and Holly feel better. Just knowing that you weren't there alone or weren't flying alone. God
so
works in mysterious ways.
For sure. So Tara was with me from December 27th until we left January 1st, and she was still with me. Stayed in the hospital with me from the 2nd until the 9th is when she went to see her family. And then was still in Tennessee and hung out with me for at least a day or so before she ended up coming back with the team. And that was the 14th of January. So we had been together for, over 2 weeks. And she literally gave up everything to come make sure I was okay. And so I know my family is so appreciative. I think my aunt said that you were totally a part of the family. And she had said that even before we had gotten back to America and everything. But so I just want to tell you, thank you so much. And so excited that we now get to do life post Big Bertha.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah, I need you to calm down on your adventure, so let's not have another one.
For everyone that knows me and knows I love a project, I'm good. I'm just going to be chill and no more adventures.
The funny thing, when we were doing the renovations, I was here for all the renovations, which is when we really started getting close. And I remember multiple times during the renovations, you would tell people, if something happens to you, Tara's the one taking care of me. Little did you know you were
4 months away from that.
Not even, was it? 3? Yeah.
August?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well,
fun times.
Thanks for sharing the story with me. And I know everybody's been asking, so this is just an easy way to share about my medical craziness. We serve a big God who is gracious and loving. We pray that everything we do is for His glory. If you love missions, know me, or have questions, please visit our website at faithondirtroads.com and send a note to join me on an episode. The link will also be on our show notes. Thank you for listening to another episode of Faith on Dirt Roads. I hope that you will subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and family. See you down the road.